guys, how's it going? Welcome to this week's recap video. It is a gorgeous morning. What a great way to start the week. The skies are clear. It looks like the smoke has gone. It is 52 degrees where I'm sitting right here. There is no, everything's still. The sun is out. That really puts you in a good mood to start the week out. And I think we're just gonna get right into the videos from last week. So the first one was planting a rose of Sharon that gets super tall. So I planted a white pillar rose of Sharon in our back garden, and it's one that gets like 2 to 3 feet wide, but anywhere from 10 to 16 feet tall. And I planted it next to a black lace elderberry. So I think that the contrast between the leaves of the black lace and the white blooms of that rose of Sharon is going to be so pretty. And then not to mention the fact that this huge pillar of a plant, I mean, that creates a statement in and of itself because it's such a different shape than most other shrubs that I have around it, at least. So first off, and I'm going to verify this really quick, but I had a lot of questions about whether or not it was going to seed itself all over the place, because some rose of Sharons do. And I believe this one's sterile. Hold on, let me double check. Yep, it looks like it says it's sterile, or they produce very, very few seeds. So they shouldn't create seedlings all over the place. And I probably should have mentioned that in the video. There are always those key things that I forget about. And I watch the video back later after I see all those questions and I think, how did I not even remember to say anything? First question was Debbie. Can you prune the white pillar rose of Sharon for height control? This would be perfect for a full sun spot. I need something that's 6 to 7 feet tall and 2 to 3 feet wide. For something that wants to get as tall as 10 to 16 feet wide, I think over time you could prune it to that height for a while, but I think it might start looking a little bit odd a little bit later on in its maturity, because when you keep pruning something down, it could make it bush out a little bit further too. So keep that in mind, because you're constantly creating more energy down below rather than letting it shoot its energy up, if that makes sense. And typically if you have something that gets 10 to 16 feet, if you're just taking a foot or two off of it every year, but still letting it get kind of to close to its maturity, you're not going to get the super huge woodiness. But if you're keeping it down that far, it can get really woody and kind of massive in the middle section. I mean, I've never done it with this plant, so you could certainly give it a try, but I would maybe do a little bit more research for more options. Sophia says, I was wondering what happened to the 4 white chiffon rose of Sharon standards that you had planted in the boxwood cutouts on September 2016. I think, now remind me, Erin, I think 2 of them struggled to the point where we ended up taking them out, and then I think we gave 2 away. Because then, you lose 2 and then all of a sudden you need 4 for it to be balanced back there. And I suppose I could have moved those other 2 somewhere else or planted 2 more. But, I don't know. Usually if I have something like that, I just find somebody that wants them in their yard and they'll come and take them from me. And then I can kind of regroup and decide if that's truly what I wanted there, and so forth. I'm kind of glad they're not there, to be honest. I love the look in that backyard. It's so peaceful back there because you've got the boxwood hedging, and then we have the alliums that come up in the spring, so you get that little bit of interest, and then there is nepeta in between. You can't really see it unless you walk up on it, but I like the simplicity of looking across that lawn and just seeing the tightly shorn boxwood hedges. There's something very peaceful about that to me, and I think that would have been broken up a little bit in the end by big rose of Sharon standards. JJ said, your formal garden gives me envy. That's so beautiful. The white rose gives life. Quick question, how do you know if roots need to be teased? So this is something I've learned quite a bit about in the last, since we started our YouTube channel, because I've learned more about gardening since I have been sharing about it in videos and getting to know people in the industry than I ever knew before. Because before our YouTube channel, I worked at a garden center. I gardened a lot. It was my hobby and my passion, but I was very focused on just the gardening that was relative to me in my area. I knew how things reacted in our area. I knew about our soil, but I didn't know about everybody else's. So I've learned a ton. And root teasing, when you talk to growers and people in the industry, they say that it's far less necessary than you might have thought. And the only time that it's really important is if the plant looks like it is severely root bound. It looks like it has been in that nursery container for a number of years, which sometimes they are. That happens. And so you'll notice when you take it out of the can, if there is no loose soil around the roots and they're just circling that can, that's when you need to break the root memory. But oftentimes you won't see me tease roots on annuals. When I'm planting them in May, they're rooted in, but they're not filling up that container like they would if you left them in there all season long. Next question was from Wendy. If you live in a zone 8, would it still need full sun? I went to local nursery and was told hydrangea needs full shade in my zone. I was bummed about the hydrangea. What would you advise? I still think it needs a lot of sun. Full sun means 6 to 8 hours. Now, if you live in an area that it's super hot, intense heat, you may have to provide some like protection in the afternoon for hydrangeas in particular. Rose Sharon's in a zone 8, I would imagine they could take your full sun for sure. You know, we are now in a zone 6. We get above 100 for several weeks. There's no humidity, no rain. Oh, there's a moth flying around. Oh, and a cat on the roof. Cat's on the roof. So our plants have to undergo a lot of different stressors here. We get high winds too. At least once a week we get a bad windstorm. So I feel like, I don't know, like hydrangeas here, we've had paniculata hydrangeas like your limelight and things like that. Firelight is a paniculata, I think. Quick fire. All of those do fantastic in the full sun for us so long as you give them enough water. And I think that that is the key for a lot of things. Like our hydrangeas, we just deluge them with water if they're in a full sun spot, and they will do it, and they will actually bloom better than something that you keep in the shade. I'm not sure even in zone 8, if you put a hydrangea in an area that doesn't get any sun, I don't know that you'd have any productivity from that plant at all. Like you'd probably have little to no blooms. So I would just...
They'd be green.
Yeah, they'd just be green leafy plants. So Rosa Sharon, I think for you is great for a full sun spot. Camille said, I'm doing a project in school and thought I would ask some of my questions. What do you love about the garden? What do you hate about it? Why do you do it? What little things are harder than it should be in the garden? And what are threats to your garden? So what do I love about the garden? Boy, I love a lot of things about the garden, but I just love watching things grow. I like to experiment with things. I like to try new varieties. It feeds me to nurture these plants and watch them do their thing. And when they finally bloom or they finally produce that vegetable or that fruit that you've been after, it gives you a feeling like I can't even explain. A lot of you guys will get that. But there's just something about feeling connected to the earth and feeling connected to what you're doing, because how our plants do are oftentimes directly correlated to the amount of effort we put into it, or the amount of love that we give them. What do you hate about it? I don't love the heat. We get very hot here and it gets hot. Excuse me, it gets hard. Anything like 90 and above, like, oh, and it's a lot of our summer, and I just don't love the heat because plants struggle here in the heat because we get no rain. So we're constantly working on drip irrigation, and it does get more pleasant. The more you figure out about irrigation, the more pleasant it gets for us, but the heat makes it pretty darn hard. Why do you do it? Because I love it. Even with the heat, I still love it. What little things are harder than should be in the garden? Bulb planting was always the worst. I used to hate to plant bulbs, and I still don't love to plant them, but since we've gotten the augers, it has made life so much easier for everything, for planting everything. We've got augers in all different sizes and heights, and so you can kind of assess what you're planting and go get the proper auger and dig yourself a hole really fast without even having to bend over. So now, Aaron oftentimes, he got is that a 3-foot auger? Like a 3-foot tall? Mm-hmm. And so it's a perfect size. It's like a 3-inch or something like that. I can't remember. So it's good for daffodil bulbs, like the big ones. Anyway, so he stands up and he pops all the holes in the ground, and I'm down there on my knees just putting the bulbs down in the holes. But it means that neither one of us is getting up and down, and that gets really tiring after a while. And I always kind of dreaded bulb planting season. I wanted to do it because it is worth it, even though I didn't like it. But now it's a lot easier. What are threats to your garden? The weather and insects, as for everybody else, I'm sure. The wind is the worst. It always happens. Like, I feel like we have a windstorm almost every week. It happens on a weekend every time, usually. And so we'll have a windstorm. We'll clean up after it. We'll recuperate our things throughout the course of the week. We get them to like this point of everything looks good. The lawn's usually mowed on a Friday. And so like Friday afternoons, I'm feeling like, oh, everything looks good again. And then we get another windstorm, and it happens all over again. It's just this constant cycle of like a little bit of discouragement, and then you feel hope by the end of the week, and then discouragement again, and then hope. And it's just kind of, ooh. And then, but I'm getting kind of used to that because that's just the way it is. And then mites are the biggest garden pest ever. Jennifer said, still anxiously awaiting the spider mite video. Please, please, please. We did film it. It will be up this week. Sorry about how long it took us. It just did. But spider mites are a total pain. We're dealing with it, particularly on our boxwood hedges on the west side this year. And we are getting a handle on it. So be watching for that. Next video was Dahlia update, tour, and arrangement. So in that video, I just wanted to show you where our dahlias were at. I planted them super late, like 2 months late this year. They're doing fantastic. I mean, given the fact that they were so late and the soil was untested and all that business that I've talked about a million times, I'm just so thrilled with what they're doing. And there's even more color out there now. And then I went around and cut some of them and we made this arrangement. Erin said, how beautiful, do you have or have you had any issues with Japanese beetles where you live? No, we do not have Japanese beetles here, thankfully. Spider mites are the worst nemesis for us here. Venus says, now that you have grown vegetables in the ground and will likely have a great yield like flowers and fruits, watermelons, do you still think going the raised bed way is better? I think they're equally awesome. I have really amazing productivity out of our raised beds, had amazing productivity out here. I think it's all in how you are, if you're consistent with water, when you're getting things going, and then how you amend in the beginning your soil. So I think doing the starter fertilizer, the compost, I'm going to do leaf mulch on the raised beds again this year. We'll probably be dumping a lot of leaf mulch out in the new property and kind of building that up as we go along. I think that's so important. The nice thing about kind of row cropping like we did out in the new property is that it's so simple. You can give things a lot of space. In raised beds, you're really concerned more about fitting a lot of productivity in a smaller amount of space. And I like the look of both of them. I like gardening in both of them. I don't know that I actually have a preference. I think they've both got their good things. I do think that doing vine crops and things like corn out there have been really nice because I just can't grow enough in a raised bed to have it make sense. So I've grown corn for the last few years in the raised beds. I can only get just a few ears out of it, a couple bundles for decorating, and out there I can plant enough to where like I had people coming and getting corn. And I was just sharing it all over the place, and now I have a bunch to decorate with. Same with vine crops. In our raised beds, I could plant like one vine crop in one raised bed because they get so enormous. So out there's enough space to let them kind of sprawl, and those are the benefits. Hallie said, do you pinch your dahlias? I saw Erin from Floret doing this, and she says you get double the blooms, but I'm scared to try. Absolutely pinch your dahlias. I did not do it this year, and the only reason I didn't was because I was so late and I was so nervous that if I pinched them, I was going to set them back even further in terms of like it would take them a little longer to start blooming. And I just thought, you know what, plant them, keep them watered, and let's just let's just see what they do this year. Next year I will be pinching because I'm hoping that we get them in the ground at the proper time. Debbie said, can the dahlia tubers winter over in the ground? They can't here. I don't know what zone they are. Let me look that up. They're really cold tender. Okay, I just did a quick Google search and an article from Longfield Gardens came up, which is a very reputable source. If you live in hardiness zones 8 to 10, where winter temperatures rarely fall below 20 degrees, you may leave your dahlia tubers right in the ground. So there you go. Yeah, we can't. So we have to dig all of those this fall. That's going to be a job. Kathleen said, I'm sure you have said, but what do you do with all those flowers? Can anyone tell me? Well, so far I've cut several arrangements. My goal was, this year I didn't really have a goal. This year I just thought, let's just get them in the ground, see how they do. And then I thought if I can get this space up to a certain point of productivity, I would love to even like hire somebody to come in part-time a couple days a week and make bouquets just to give away. I want to take them to nursing homes and hospitals. That was the plan for this year. I think I mentioned that during our planning stages early, like even in the wintertime. And then everything kind of hit the fan with COVID, and we've just kind of like tried to figure out what we could do best to give away what we have out here, because we do have a massive amount. Even with all the winds, the sunflowers look horrible in terms of like the plants look horrible, but I think there's still lots of salvageable blooms. So we are putting together a video this week. My mom and I are going to put together a bunch of bouquets, and we're going to do something. But that's the goal in the end. That's what I would like out of this space. I would like to have friends and family come over when they want to cut stuff for their homes, or if they have an event. I would like to give them away just to brighten somebody's day. It's not to sell them. I grow it just for the love of growing it and to share with you guys how things are going. And so if you're trying to do something similar, hopefully seeing our process might be helpful in a way, either learning what to do or what not to do. But anyway, it's just going to be an evolving process at this point. I can't believe how many flowers are actually out there. Helen said, are you going to sell these at your mom's nursery? No. And Sarah said, how do you prevent bringing bugs into the house with your flowers? Somehow, I don't know, I prep all my flowers usually outside on a table. And I don't know if just like the ride from, usually I have them in the gator out in the garden or a cart. And I have them in a bucket, and then they ride, you know, I have to pull them to the house, and I think maybe all that jostling kind of maybe knocks some of them off. And then I do my prep out on the concrete table right outside of our kitchen most of the time, so I can leave all my mess on the ground, and then I can use the blower. It's a lot easier to clean up. So I think a lot of them get dislodged that way, but I honestly don't have that many bugs in them. I haven't noticed that many at all. I have not used any insecticides at all out there in that space this year, not for anything. So I don't know if like that'll catch up with me at some point. Maybe the insects just haven't found it yet. The honeybees sure have, but so far I haven't noticed it be a problem at all. Eddie said, I tried growing dahlias years ago. The bugs ate them. Do you notice a difference in performance or quality with plants, bulbs purchased from, say, Florets, Eden Brothers versus purchasing from big box stores? I have noticed absolutely no quality difference between any of the sources that I got tubers from. They have all grown for the most part, and they're all getting ready to bloom, or they are all blooming at this point. Samantha said, all those shades of pink to brown to terracotta. May I ask what is growing on the trellis behind you? It's so full and green. That, let's see, what was back behind me? The Morning Glory, I think. It was on that big kind of wide trellis. It's the Clark's Heavenly Blue Morning Glory. And then, are you still planning on dropping off some arrangements at nursing homes? Something like that this week. Next video was 5 shrubs that deliver huge fall color. So I just shared 5 shrubs that I think are gorgeous in the fall. And I don't think I've actually featured any of the 5. I'm trying to think if I've ever talked about any of those 5 in any other videos. I don't think I have. So it was really fun to talk about something brand new. JM said, if the fine line buckthorn is deciduous, why would you want it for a privacy hedge? I can see your point. Buckthorns so typically get very thick, like the branches are very thick. So even when they lose their leaves, you might be able to see through them a little bit more, but not a ton. It's not like they're really open and airy because they grow so compact. And oftentimes too, a privacy hedge is not as necessary, not as necessary in the winter months when they don't have leaves, because we're just not outside like we are in the spring and summer and fall, if that makes sense. So, you know, oftentimes it's not something, I don't know, does that make sense? Yeah, like in the wintertime, yeah, you're not outside, and maybe you do if you like are trying to block something that you see all year long and you do not want to see it at all, then maybe plant something evergreen. And then you won't have to worry about that, but I think they make an excellent privacy screen. Next question is from Ken. When it comes to zones, does the higher number mean that's as warm a climate as it can tolerate? Not necessarily. I think plants can tolerate warmer climates. It's just that they need a specific amount of cold in the winter in order to perform. Like some plants need to go dormant in order to perform the next year. Some plants maybe don't. Like tropical plants aren't like that, I think. I think they just keep on growing all year long, or they might have a season where they're not like actively growing, but they're just still sitting there looking beautiful and stuff. But there are some plants, like dogwoods are one of them, and that's one of the ones I talked about. I think it was a zone 3 through 7, I think. But those dogwoods need to lose their leaves. They need to go through a certain amount of cold in order for them to build up enough energy to perform the next year. Gardening Obsessed says, I love that dogwood. Mine has gotten really large, and I think I will do what you suggested and trim a third of it because I'm too scared to take it all away. Should I trim now in the fall or wait until spring? I would wait until early spring. I mean, because you want to enjoy, unless the branches are not pretty. If they're old and corky brown color and you don't mind getting rid of them and you want to kind of lighten up the load of your canopy there, then go ahead and trim them this fall. But usually we want to enjoy the branches throughout the winter time, so early spring is the best time. T-Doll said, I'm looking for more info on the buckthorn. Is it the same invasive buckthorn that is in northern Illinois, Wisconsin? Our forest preserves have programs for volunteers to remove it from their lands, and we spent this spring and probably the next 2+ years removing it from our small woodland area. It is a buckthorn, but it is not the same as the invasive type. So I was actually talking to the grower at Proven Winners, kind of getting some information on that, because it's not, and buckthorns aren't an invasive species here where I'm at. So we can plant any species of buckthorn and it won't take off. But the fine line, they actually have like a almost sterile nature, to where the seeds that they throw are 98% unviable. Only 2% of them usually come up, as opposed to the older varieties where a lot of them would come up. So it's not something that I would probably worry about, but in states like that have invasive buckthorn, I know that they probably would just lump all buckthorns together and just say no. And I get that. I mean, in our state, butterfly bushes, what other ones? Butterfly bushes, I don't think so anymore. Butterfly bushes are termed a noxious weed here in our state, but it's on the western side of our state where they take off. Here, they don't seed themselves at all. So there are some varieties of butterfly bush I can't grow, even though it would be fine for our particular area in the state. But since it's, you know, noxious in one part, they just kind of lump us all together. Kayla said, where are you going to put these in your garden? I'm not exactly sure. I do know the fine lines. We decided we're going to take those to my brother and sister-in-law's house because I think they've got a perfect place for them. They've already planted 5 and they've kind of wanted 5 more somewhere very nearby. So I think we're going to take those over and plant them there. And I think that'll be a good location. And then we've got so much opportunity to plant so many different things, especially on the new property. We're going to be starting to carve out flower beds. We've got water out there now. So anyway, yeah, we'll just start going to town. Okay, the next video was a gender reveal miniature garden. And in that video, we just put together a little fairy garden to reveal that we are having a little girl, which we are so excited about. And I have to be honest, I was shocked. I thought for sure we were going to have another boy. I was geared up and excited for that. I mean, I know what to do with a little boy. So I just thought, well, it'll be easy. If we have another little boy, I know exactly what to do. But I am looking forward to the opportunity of raising a little girl. I think it's going to be such a fun experience. When I went to the ultrasound appointment, because I went by myself, I had the technicians just write the gender down on a piece of paper, and I didn't look at it. I came home and Aaron hopped in the truck and we drove down the lane just a little ways and we opened it together and just both like, we were just shocked. We were like, what? It's a girl? And then we got real excited to call all of our family right then and there to tell them. And anyway, it took me a full week to figure out how to let you guys know because I really want to not veer. I want to be super careful about keeping our content focused on what it should be, which is gardening and plants. And so a fairy garden, my sister was like, you should just do a fairy garden. And so I thought that is a great idea. Anyway, it was just super fun. Sheila said, congrats. Do you do landscape plans? No. And in fact, that is one of my least favorite gardening things to do, like going back to the what do I hate about gardening, landscape plans. It's something I had to do at the garden center and I did not enjoy that at all. And my mom, when we very first started our YouTube channel, she was like, so what's the goal with this? What are you, where are you trying to go with it? And I think she was angling, trying to figure out like, are you going to leave? And I just told her my goal is just to be able to say no to landscape plans, which I've attained, which is awesome. Next question is from Elena. Congratulations, do you still garden during pregnancy? I heard it's unsafe, but that may be an old wives' tale. I definitely think you can still garden. I mean, definitely follow your doctor's advice. Start with that. I think it's fine as long as you modify what you're doing. Like right now, Aaron is digging all of our big holes. He is lugging the soil bags. I'm not doing a lot of that. I'll carry 1 cubic foot bags of plants, or soil rather, and then I'll carry like flats of plants. I've talked to my doctor often about what's okay and what's not okay, and he has advised me on what he thinks. So I really do follow that. I was put on restricted activity for about a little over a month in the beginning because I had some big complications, and so I really had to like take it down a lot of notches, and I couldn't do very much. Like I could plant a little 4-inch plant can. I mean, and as you get further along too, it gets physically harder, and especially if you have rib issues. I have rib issues right now, and it's very painful. Like it's painful sitting here right now with a rib issue. Really any time that I'm not just laying flat on my back. But I know it's short term, so like it's totally fine. We just keep on going and we get the job done, and we just try not to overdo it. And I don't. Wouldn't you say, Erin? Like, I mean, my activity level is way lower than it usually is, and I cannot wait to be back to normal. Kim said, have you thought of a name? Not really. I mean, we have a couple of names we've talked about, one of which I kind of like a little better. But I don't know. We haven't really talked about it a ton. We probably though won't say anything because we're so, like with Benjamin, we didn't say anything, did we? Because we weren't sure until the very end. And you hate to say anything like to family because, a lot of times the family, when they're getting gifts for the baby, it's personalized. And so you hate to change the name at the very last minute and then have this personalized stuff that doesn't go with the baby anymore. Anyway, Liz said, question, will you name her like a flower or a name related to gardening? And I did see that question a lot. And I think it's natural for people just to think I'm going to name the baby Daisy or Lily, or I saw Rose a lot. I have a niece named Rosemary, which is the cutest thing. We call her Rosie, and she fits her name beautifully. But nothing I have thought of goes along the lines of gardening. I mean, you never know, but I tend to go for like strong classic names that are spelled normal, So it'll probably be something in that category. All right, next video is fall in shades of pink, which totally didn't relate to us revealing that we were having a girl, but it just kind of like naturally happened to where I put together this pink themed fall container. Lisa said, reminded me of your tub of strawberries. How will you overwinter the tub of strawberries? So I did plant a galvanized container full of strawberries this spring. We will probably pick it up and put it in our cold frame and let it winter there. I do think they would probably winter over. They'll probably winter over just fine in that tub if I left them out, but you just never know. A little bit of protection on those is not a bad idea. Tammy said, does anyone know if the pink berries are poisonous? Okay, so I Google searched it under Symphocarpus, which is the botanical name of a snowberry. It says the round berries on the common snowberry have saponins in them, which are toxic but poorly absorbed by the body and tend to pass through and cause little harm. Laversha says, what's the difference between a viola and a pansy? Violas are much more cold tolerant, oftentimes perennial, and they have smaller flowers, and pansies have bigger flowers, and oftentimes in a colder climates they don't come back, but they do seed themselves, and if you have a mild winter, sometimes you'll have little pansy seedlings come up in the spring. Julie said, do you ever do a fall hanging basket? No. And now I never want to like pigeonhole myself, but I am not a huge fan of hanging baskets in general. I never really have been, and like never say never, because I do occasionally plant one. And I just like, I kind of like to experiment and think like, maybe I've changed, maybe my taste has changed, but like I just don't, there's no area in my entire garden or house where I think it looks natural to have a hanging basket. And I have a hard time with them. So, I mean, I do like hanging baskets like with big ferns hanging on porches, like wraparound porches. I think that's really pretty. But yeah, I don't know. It's just not in my wheelhouse at this point in my life. Lady Daisy said, are you having issues with air quality? Yes, we were having issues, but it looks like things are clearing up. I mean, blue skies. What do you think? It was like a week, 10 days, Erin, where it was pretty socked in and smoky. Yeah. There were a couple of days where they just said, don't go outside. And the fires aren't even, like they're on the other side of the state, and we were just getting what they had just gone through or was still going through. And I can't even imagine. I saw pictures and video from that side of the state, and it's just horrible. Oh. Alyssa said, are you still weekly feeding? For instance, your caladiums and coleus. Well, caladiums we don't feed weekly because they don't like that amount of food. Coleus we typically do feed weekly, but we've stopped fertilizing all of our summer annuals because it's getting cold enough where we're about ready. Like potato vines are starting to show cold, like they got zapped by cold, and we're going to start switching most everything over to fall containers, so we just find it at this point of the year a little bit wasteful to use fertilizer when we're just going to be pulling a lot of those things. Clint said, you mentioned that you don't use any starter fertilizer because they're going to go dormant in the cooler weather. When I do plant a fall container, I don't put in a continuous release fertilizer just because they're not going to be growing as actively as they would be during the growing season. So in that case, I do feel like it's a little bit of an unnecessary step. I mean, go ahead and do it if that's like part of your routine and your habit. It's not going to hurt anything whatsoever. Would you still recommend doing that in a warmer zone? Boy, I would probably ask somebody at your local garden center and ask them what they do, how they treat their plants. In a zone 8, I feel so far removed from a zone 8. Like I said, I don't think it's ever a bad thing, and if you have a lot longer growing season than we do here, then it might benefit your plants, and you may not have to do like a water soluble fertilizer if you've got something in the soil. So I think I would give it a try. And the last video was staking up a large grass and drying herbs, and in that video I staked up a huge miscanthus cabaret. I'm looking at it right now. Every single year I let it flop over. Every single year I say I'm going to preventatively stake it up, and I never do. It needs to be divided horribly bad, and then it'll probably stop flopping. So that's something I do plan on doing maybe this next spring. Like, hopefully, we'll see how it goes. And then I dried some herbs, and I just harvested a bunch of different things in the garden. I'm trying out that Stack It. I think that's what it's called. It's like a foldable stacking mesh drying system, and I have it hung up in one of our rooms inside. Everything is pretty much dry at this point. It only took a few days, and I just tried a bunch of different herbs. There's a lot of different schools of thought on how you should dry different things, but I do think it's very much so based on your climate, how much humidity is in your air, and so forth. So I was just going to run some experiments. So far they look like they've all dried beautifully. M.I. Honeybee said, I needed this video. I'm new to harvesting my own plants, and you've been so helpful. The tied up grass looks wonderful. I wouldn't have thought to do it in sections. Seems much easier. You speak eloquently, and I'm curious if you write up or think. Did you get that whole comment, Erin?
Yeah.
I think it's cut off, but I'm guessing what she's going to say, or he or she, I'm not sure. You speak eloquently, and I'm curious if you write up or think about it maybe beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
No. In fact, if you were Ken, who edits a lot of our videos, he will tell you that sometimes it takes me like 10 takes to get my words out, because sometimes, like, yeah, sometimes it's hard, and sometimes my brain is not really, into whatever I'm doing. You guys know how it goes. Sometimes it's thinking about something else, and I really need to, like, focus on what I'm doing, and sometimes it's difficult. But no, I don't write up or think about what I'm going to say. If we're doing a video like this spider mite video, for example, that's coming out this week, I did get my thoughts down on paper, bullet pointed, because we talked about like 10 different products. We talked about a whole bunch of stuff, and I didn't want to leave anything out because it was a really important thing to not leave stuff out, because I talked about organics and synthetics and things you can use and how to use them properly and that sort of thing. I think it's really important in those cases where, you know, you could potentially mess something up and accidentally kill pollinators that you don't mean to. I think it's important to get it right. When I'm vlogging staking up a grass, like, it's not going to hurt anybody if I do something wrong there. And I think we put in a sentence, didn't I put in a sentence about how, like, I am going to divide this, because I watched it back and, like, I never said I was actually going to divide it. Maybe I should let everybody know, because I'm sure that a lot of people will let me know that I should. Anyway, see, that's what happens. And then I start rattling on, like it took me, 3 minutes to answer that one question. Maybe I should think about my words more often. Angie said, I'd love to have an herb garden. Which ones should you plant together, and which ones don't go together? Geez, I don't know. I just plant what I want together. I know companion planting is a thing. I don't really adhere to any of those. I don't even know what is it. I know there's a book called Carrots Love Tomatoes. So carrots apparently and tomatoes go well together. I don't know. I usually try to somewhat crop rotate every year so that my alliums are not planted in the same spot. My corn's not planted in the same spot. My tomatoes are not planted in the same spot, just so that you're just keeping a rotation going, and you know, the nutrients that each plant uses is different, so that, you know, you're not sapping each area of earth from a specific nutrient year after year after year, although we add a lot of stuff back in every year. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure that there are schools of thought on that. I'm sure you could Google which herbs like to be planted together and which ones you don't, but typically it's not something I ever think about. I just think, I have a spot, this is like dill would look really good right there. That's what I plant right there. The Impatient Gardener said, I'm going to start keeping track of missed Erin theme song opportunities. That was a perfect opportunity. Dang. Cindy said, are those pansies behind you in the greenhouse? Yes, they are beautiful and look huge, so pretty. I have a lot of fall plants sitting in the greenhouse ready to go out into planters. This week I think it's going to be a pretty big week. It looks like a gorgeous week weather-wise. It looks like we might get some wind at the end of the week, so we'll see how things shape up. Betty said, how is your tree that split and you put back together? So the honey locust tree up in Versailles that split right down the trunk, and it's like a 3 to 4 foot long split right down the center of the trunk. Erin cabled it back together and it looks great. It hasn't skipped a beat. We've had some massive windstorms after he did the cabling. I'm thankful he got it done so quickly. And it hasn't, it doesn't even look like anything's wrong with that tree at all. It looks like one side of the split, he was able to get one side a little bit closer together, and it almost looks healed on that side. The other side has more of a gap, and it just wouldn't come together on that side. And I don't think that where it's split it'll actually heal back together, but the bark, if you can get it close together, the bark might heal itself over. But yeah, both sides of the tree look beautiful. There has been no wilting, no yellowing, nothing. I'm so thankful for that, because I was not ready for that tree to go. And usually I'm pretty good about when there's a disaster in the garden, you just deal with it and you move on. It gives you an opportunity to plant something new. And I try not to be super bummed, because it's just, you can't control it. It's going to do what it wants to do. But I wasn't really ready for that one to go. And so I was so thankful so far that everything's looking great. And that's it, you guys. That is the recap for this week. Hope it was helpful. Hope you're having a great day, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.